Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today we're going to be doing a should you buy video on the new Aegis Nautilus. Now, if you're not familiar with this ship and concept sale, it's a first of its kind for the game, being a mine layer and a mine sweeper. Now, the Nautilus is on sale for $675, real dollars, war bond, which for a mine layer feels kind of absurd. But let's jump into what we at least know about this ship first and see if that price tag ends up being somewhat justified and who it may be right for. Now, in lore, this is an older ship, going back at least 400 years as the tactical mine layer that's been utilized by the UEE Navy, where it's been used to deploy, sweep for existing mines, and then end up disarming them as they go. Now, the Nautilus saw a lot of use during the Xi'an Cold War, primarily in maintaining the Perry Line. And while this is where it was really becoming a well-known ship, it was also involved in the Second Tevarin War, as well as in existing Vanduul conflicts and as part of the overall militia initiatives to kind of help reduce threats from those that are breaking laws and just kind of keeping the peace. So with that, there are two different types of mines that are going to be a part of this ship's arsenal to start, which I could obviously see them adding more later on down the line. The first one is going to be a weapons platform, and the second is an explosives mine. Now, with the weapons platform, it's basically a mine that's known as the Sentry, which has a role to act in a perimeter defense capacity, basically sitting in wait for a ship to enter its area of effectiveness, and then it opens fire. Now, while we don't really know what size weapons these have or what the range actually is, it is saying that these are highly accurate weapons. My guess here is that we're going to see probably size 2s, although they are probably going to come with lower range, so I'm not positive on how that balance plays out. I'm just thinking about how big some of these guns actually are, and if you want them to be on something relatively small like a mine, I'm thinking of size 2 is about the biggest you're going to get, unless I'm really underestimating how big these mines are. The other mine is a little bit more straightforward. It's an explosive mine. It's basically a homing mine that is built for maintaining defensive boundaries, and once you're in range, it moves towards you until it can be detonated with a big blast. Now, there's obviously a lot of questions that come to mind that have to be answered, though, like how long can they track you? Can they be can countermeasures be used? Can I just outrun one? We don't know. In addition to those two mine types, the Nautilus also brings along a set of drones that are known as NEMO, which is an acronym for Neutralize and Employ Mine Ordnance, which basically means that it can go out and safely deactivate and collect mines. I don't know how many of these you have on your ship. I'm also curious that if you can grab a mine, can you end up flipping it over to your side and use it again? So if you come across an enemy mine, can you actually increase the amount of mines you have out and present? Or do you basically just deactivate it and leave it behind? I also wonder if these Nemo drones are capable on other ships that we have in the verse. For example, the Carrack, the Reclaimer, and the Vulcan are all known to be utilizing drones, so could they end up using a Nemo on board to help kind of clean some of this up? The documentation from the Aegis event did mention that anyone laying mines needs to have one of these on board from like an amendment or kind of a legislation type of perspective. So it seems like it's probably not going to be proprietary to this ship, especially since it's not Aegis branded, but we'll see. Now, as far as the functionality is concerned, it's a bit hard to tell from what we've received so far about how you go about deploying and collecting mines. There's kind of a dual mine bays and just control sections within the ship. My best guess, though, is that it's actually related to the flaps that you see on the top and the bottom of the ship where you pop out, which I'm assuming gives you some room to not hit your ship with these mines. But there are some images where it looks like you're deploying from the rear of the ship. So unless I've really missed something, I guess we'll just have to kind of wait and see what that ends up being. Design-wise, it's very familiar. It almost looks like a Polaris and a fighter mated and had a baby ship. But it's a ship. It's a sharp-looking ship. The bridge is fairly standard as far as kind of orientation is concerned, where you have a captain's chair and two operator seats. It looks like you have a nice hologlobe for the captain, as well as with some really good visibility in all directions, even though there are some pillars and things that kind of block your view. There's a lot of glass up there, which is great for if you're trying to identify things that you need to deactivate. The ship is big, significantly larger than I would have expected, coming in a hair larger than the Hammerhead. In fact, let's run down a couple of the stats of the ship real quick since we're talking about size. 125 meters long, so 10 meters longer than the Hammerhead. It's 72 meters wide and 21.6 meters tall. It has a crew size of 8. You have 64 SEU of cargo. So not a lot of cargo, which makes me think that the mines are not occupying that space. So you have mine storage and then a secondary cargo space where you can hopefully have whatever you need on board. All of the components on this ship are labeled as large. All of these, the jump drive, the quantum drive, and the life support, you have one large. As far as the power plant, the coolers, and the fuel tanks, both regular and quantum, you do have 2 large. And then shield generators, you end up having 3 large shield generators. As well as having heavy armor and 2 power plants to kind of help keep that up. This is a ship that seems like it is going to be extremely durable, and with 2 large fuel tanks, I'm expecting this thing to be a ship that's designed to be out and about for a while. Now, as far as what that means is there's like amenities on board the ship go, as far as like beds and mess halls and those types of things. It's a big ship, it's bigger than a hammerhead. I expect it to be able to have some of that stuff on board. Is it going to have things like a med bay or a repair bay? I highly doubt it, but you never know. So we'll kind of see what comes out of that as we get more information. Weapons wise, there is a lot on this as far as just size. The front of the ship actually has a turret with 2 size 7 guns as far as a manned turret. That is way bigger than I would have expected to have on a ship like this. I mean, that is significantly bigger than guns that we have on other ships. The Hammerhead, for example, which is basically a glorified gunboat, the biggest size weapon they have on that is 4. Now, there is like about 26 of them or 28 of them on the Hammerhead, so that's obviously a big difference here. But when you're talking about 2 size 7s on the front, I mean, that kind of gets into that STS category. So I was very surprised by that. There's also 2 size 3 ball turrets that are manned as well. I say 2 size 3. It has there's 2 of these turrets, and there's 2 size 3 guns on each one of them. There's also a size 3 manned missile turret. So it sounds like this ship ended up getting a lot more weaponry and armory and basically just combat focus than I would have ever really expected. So with that in mind, who should end up buying the Nautilus? The hard part here is the cost and the size, because I personally see no reason why this ship needs to be as big as it is. I also don't really understand mine gameplay that much either. It seems in ships where we readily have 6 degrees of flight available to us, it should be relatively easy to move around the mines and not have to worry about running into them, unless they end up being very hard to pick up on scanners. It's also kind of boring and potentially very frustrating gameplay to just travel a long distance into a system and just trip a mine and blow a chunk of your ship off and you're stranded. I get that to some extent, but it kind of comes down to that gameplay. What does it take to scan? How easy are these things to see? How careful do you really need to be? Either way, because it's borderline cap ship in size, it almost makes the cost make sense. But there was no reason for it to be this big just to have a focus on mines. Did it need to have 2 by size 7 gun turret on the nose? Not at all. But I'm sure that's helping to justify the cost to some extent. So did we see some of the design of this ship try to justify the expense of the ship? Or was there a real reason that they wanted a minesweeper to stay in this cost size, in this ship size? I think we need to see what the justification is as we get more information from CIG. Is it because they want a minesweeper to stay close to a fleet so it can be useful in a fight? I kind of don't get it. There's a lot of other things that we need answers to in order to really understand if it's even close to being the right cost for this. Things like how powerful are the mines? How big are the guns on the mines? How many can you drop? How long can they survive without your intervention? Do you need to go out and rearm them or refuel them or rekit them? Do you need to put new components in them? Do you get credit if you kill somebody with a bounty but you're not present? How does it associate that to you? How can you counter these when you're in a ship? There are a ton of questions that are related to mine gameplay. So frankly, for me, right now, this ship is pretty easy to say, no, don't buy this ship. It's not worth the money. I think it's way bigger than it needs to be, which, unless they come back in like a Q&A post or an update post and tell me that it's actually a cruiser or destroyer or something like that that happens to have minesweeping ability, and they wanted this to be borderline cap ship in size, okay, maybe. I compare this to the Polaris, though, which was similar in price. That comes with 28 of the largest offensive torpedoes in the game. You get 5 turrets with 2 size 4s on them. You get a small hangar for a fighter and more. It just feels like there's a lot more value to something like the Polaris, and there's just not a lot to justify the cost on the Nautilus. So who, after all of that, would still buy it? I mean, technically, if you're passionate about laying mines, this is the only one, so there's that. If you want a ship that has some beefy weapons on the front turret with enough armor and shields to stay in place for a long while, then yeah, this is an option. I guess if you have an extremely defensive mindset, or maybe you're an organization that has a base that you want to protect or a stockpile, or maybe as an organization you want to try and lock down trade lanes, then maybe laying mines is an attractive option. Frankly, though, I still think knowing trade lanes and finding slightly off the road approaches may allow kind of missing these traps be easy. You know, for those, and not to play with words here, but, you know, for those that are interested in doing mining, like not laying mines, but actually mining rocks, if you find some really good, you know, areas and asteroids that are really rich, you may want to lay some mines around your mining area so that if somebody comes in to try and work a field that you've already kind of laid your stake to, then maybe it's a good way to kind of prevent that, especially if you already have like something legally claiming that area. So I don't know. Either way, my advice at this point would be, until we know a lot more about this ship, don't get this ship. But at the end of the day, it's your money, so do what you like with it. But just know my recommendation is there's too many unknowns right now to say thumbs up. Anyway, that's what we have now on the Aegis Nautilus. If you have questions, please get them in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for a lot more on this ship as we get more details in the near future. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Thanks for watching, and take care.